Hey there, welcome all you cool Sephardim and Yidden. We're going to be doing a very special session today. We're going to be doing a follow-up for the workshop that we did on the other night. On the other night, we had a very special workshop. It was about shopping for a Sephardic Passover during the COVID-19 crisis. How do you shop for a Sephardic Passover, especially during a time in which there's runs on the markets because of a plague, and who knew? And so it's never been harder to really shop for a Passover holiday, and like it has been for this year. And it's really hard because it's hard enough to get food. As it is, at this time of year, let alone getting everything that we need for the Passover holiday. Planning for the Passover holiday is very difficult because, we really need to have either purely organic or specially made batches of food that are made just for the holiday. And, with runs on the market, it's made it very difficult for us to get a lot of staples that we're normally dependent on. And that freaked me out during the first days of the runs on the market. Certain staples in the Sephardic tradition that I really depended on, such as beans and rice, were not available there. And when I was finally able to find some things, was very rarely able to find things that were actually kosher for Passover. Because of additives and fillers and all kinds of weird stuff on some of these products I found they just weren't appropriate. I was starting to get worried already weeks ahead of time. Now, a lot of us have already been stressed out being in quarantine for these many weeks, and it got even harder this week. We're coming into the Passover holiday. We're in the final stretch, and then Sunday, the authorities finally announced that we need to avoid going to the supermarket if at all possible. That we need to, avoid supermarket visits. That was the advice that was given by the authorities of the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, and that was repeated Monday by the White House during a press conference. And so while we're all emotionally overwhelmed, physically overwhelmed, there is this extra element to it. And for those of us who are planning for the Passover holiday, we can't avoid going to the market. It's just not possible for us to avoid going to the market. Not just because we need to get food for the Seder, we have to get food for 8 days. Much of the food we have to get ahead of time, for reasons of Jewish law, to check them, to make sure that they're Hummus free and stuff like this. And so it's been very difficult. And so I had to go to the supermarket today. It was very stressful. I've been to the supermarket twice. I was able to go to Gelston's. Marie, thank you for taking me, shopping to be able to get what we needed. My mom pointed me to, the stuff that they had at Gelston's markets, and so I was able to go there and get some stuff. But it was really hard. It probably took about an hour to get inside because there was a line that, was wrapped all the way around the shopping center. And I'm going towards the exit, and it took a long time to get inside. And it was even harder today going to Food for Less. Going to Food for Less, it was finally you were able to see that they had really been able to restock the shelves, but there were a lot of things. There were a lot of whole sections that were completely empty. And so it was really stressful going out, doing shopping, and seeing all the extra measures that there's being taken and to try to keep people safe, because it's very hard to keep people safe out there in the markets, because for those of you who've gone, you've noticed people aren't covering up. Very few people have masks. Very few people are following a lot of the rules. And so it's very stressful. So I want to give us some advice on how to shop as quickly and as efficiently as possible for us to get in and out and to get everything that we need to have a kosher, and a happy and tasty holiday with a festive, with festive offerings on our plate. And so, but some of you sent some questions in, and I'm going to be answering some of those questions along the way. And but those of you who stick around to the end, you're going to be able to find out some good stuff, like what the kosher for Passover vodka and tequila is. I actually did some checking on this for those of you who are stressed out and are going to be relying on the spirits, I got you covered during the holiday season. So let's go ahead and start talking about some of the important points. And we're just going to go down some of these really quickly because I just want to recap on some of these because I know a lot of people had questions. So I just want to recap on some of these. So number one, it is very important on Passover that it is our tradition that we make everything from scratch if possible. To avoid, we generally avoid, products that are processed in order to avoid additives, preservatives, and fillers that are often chametz. Oftentimes, within our products, we will find chametz in the forms of additives, preservatives, and fillers. And oftentimes, just to make a product, cheaper, especially in this country, it's very common for them to add fillers into items. And many of them can come from the 5 grains that become chametz when you add water to them naturally. And that is wheat, barley, rye, oats, spelt, and so it's very important that we try to avoid any of these as extra additives. But it's also important that, and this is the second point, that with all processed foods, that we make sure that processed foods have a kosher-for-Passover certification on them. There are some items that we aren't going to be able to get, just completely unprocessed. In this country, there's a lot of things that do come with some type of preservatives or additives for safety reasons. However, within this country, we often have around the Passover season special batches of things that are made for the Passover season. So it is important that if we are not getting something that is completely unprocessed, that the processed items that we buy, that they do have a kosher for Passover certification on them. And let me show you what a kosher for Passover certification looks like. And let me go ahead and just kind of zoom in right here. The kosher for Passover certification on this one is by the Orthodox Union, and that's the OU right there. And these are on almond macaroons, and so these are OU, and they're parv, but that P right there does not stand for parv. If it was just regular parv, it would be OU by itself, and only rarely put parv. Sometimes they put it, but you don't often. When something's parv, meaning it doesn't have dairy or meat in it, it'll just be OU by itself. The P, though, right here, it stands for Passover. That means that it is a Passover item. So whenever you find the symbol on a product, it means it is kosher for Passover. And that is on the symbol that we're looking for. Whenever we're purchasing something, we want to make sure that it has a kosher for Passover certification on this. And that is very, very important. What is also important for me to note at this time about this is that as we start talking about eating kitniyot, and I'm Sephardic. I'm of the Sephardic Jewish tradition, and so it is of the common tradition of Sephardic Jews to eat kitniyot, which are legumes. We generally eat beans, lentils, pulses, rices. These types of things are generally permitted in the Sephardic Jewish tradition because they are our native species. Rice and beans and all of these are normal parts of our diet. They're staples of our diet, and because we generally grow them, we grow them locally, and it is part of our culture. We know how to process them correctly for the Passover holiday, and so we do hand down traditions and how to be able to source kosher for Passover legumes and stuff like this. And so the thing is that for Ashkenazi Jews from Central and Eastern Europe, they come from a part of the world in which these products are not native. So when they encountered them, in modern times, what happens is that they didn't know whether these items were, could become chametz. When you add water to them, do they rise on their own? They didn't really know the answer to that, and they didn't really know how they were grown, generally from where they were imported, whether or not they were grown next to grain products that are chametz, or they were treated with stuff like that. And so not being able to answer these questions, they just, we've never done it before, so we don't do it, during the Passover holiday. And but what's happened is that in modern years, it's been very important for, especially in the state of Israel, where most people are half Sephardic Jewish, half Middle Eastern, Spanish, Portuguese Jewish, and North African, Middle Eastern tradition, and half Central and Eastern European. What happens is that the native tradition of the Middle East is to eat these things, and most people are mixed. So what happens is that in recent years, a lot of people approach the rabbis within Israel, specifically within the conservative movements, within the rabbinic schools. We're of both traditions. Which tradition can we keep? And the real answer, that was kind of given to them was that it's really up to you, to choose your tradition. This is the native tradition of of the Middle East, and you can keep this tradition of eating kitniyot if you want to. So there was a response that was written in Israel that allows, just generally amongst people who live within Israel, that they can adopt the native land, the tradition of the native land of eating kitniyot. And so what happens is that that got a lot of discussion in North America. Is the conservative movement, are the progressive Jewish movements in North America, and they're going to go that direction? And there's still a lot of discussion within that. We really don't know which direction that's going to go. But it is looking like in the years to come, there is going to be a lot more acceptance of eating kitniyot and allowing for modern Jewish families to be able to take on that tradition themselves. What is important to note about this is that many people have kind of gotten this wrong in how that's understood. What they've kind of interpreted this as is that if we start allowing kitniyot, then what happens is that now you're able to just, buy whatever product that you want. And now you can just, buy, any type of product that has any of these things, because we don't have to worry about cross-contamination. And that is not what the ruling is. That's exactly what the ruling did not want people to come to the conclusion of. What is very important for us to keep in mind is that if we are trying to source kosher for Passover kitniyot products, where we're trying to source food in the Sephardic tradition, we still have the same type of requirements that we have in the Ashkenazi tradition. Everything that does not come from complete raw has to have a certification listed on it. So there are certifications that have now been developed in order for us to be able to identify which items are kosher for Passover. And so that is very important for me to show you. Let me go ahead and share with you my screen on this so you can see these. Okay. So this is the first symbol that was rolled out here in North America by the Orthodox Union. The OU, they rolled out the first kitniyot certification. So if you find an item that does include kitniyot, and it is kosher for Passover, this is the symbol that you're going to find on it. It says OU kitniyot, and it says on it, acceptable for use by those who consume kitniyot on Passover. It just doesn't assume that it's just Sephardim, that it's just Spanish, Portuguese, and Middle Eastern Jews. It does accept the idea that there are some people that are Ashkenazi Jews that also do keep the tradition of eating kitniyot. So there is a certification. Now you can find products that are certified as kosher for Passover that are kitniyot items. And I actually bought one of them in the first year that they rolled out. The first item that I had seen that had a kosher for Passover certification for kitniyot was bamba, peanut butter bamba, which are like the Israeli #1 snack treat. They're their peanut butter, puffs. They're like cheese puff, except made of the peanut butter. And so, yeah, they had just imported those, and those were the first product in the United States that got a kitniyot kosher for Passover certification as an imported item from Israel that they started importing here. But the truth be told, I didn't find a whole lot of items in the first couple of years within the markets. As a matter of fact, these were all of the kitniyot certified products that I found at the kosher market. There was bambam, there was some hummus, small little containers of hummus that were like for $4.99, $5, and a little bit more expensive because of it had more expensive ingredients that was used in it, and then some some cakes and stuff like that. So it was rather interesting that was all I found. In most of the kosher markets. Again, in the United States, they assume that most people are Ashkenazi. There has not been generally a big public demand and outcry for these items, but they'll stock it if we start asking for it. Is what my point is. And people ask for peanut butter bamba in the United States for Passover, and that's what they remembered in Eretz Yisrael, so they brought it here, and so. That's really interesting. One of the other things that, I do want to point out is that there is a second hechsher in the United States for kosher for Passover certification. Star K, that's based out of Baltimore, Maryland. Star K, they actually have a Sephardic line, and it's Star S. And it just looks, just like their other certification, except in the middle, it doesn't have K for kosher, it has S. So it's Star K Sephardic. And what's very important for me to also note about, this one is that, Star, the Star K Sephardic, Star S, they're not just important for Passover, they're actually important because they actually certify a lot of products that Sephardic Jews, that Spanish, Portuguese, and Middle Eastern Jews won't eat. Generally with North American kosher certification, because Ashkenazi Jews don't keep certain traditions, and therefore they demand a little bit more, a little bit more stringency, believe it or not. So my point is, the Star Sephardic is not a mark that is a more lenient mark. No, they certify kosher for Passover products for Sephardic Jews. But when it comes to the products that they certify in all year round, they're actually more strict than the Ashkenazi communities. Like, for instance, in the Ashkenazi communities, making certain things like, bread and something, the only thing that you need to do is throw a piece of wood into the fire or light the light, and that's fine. It's included as if a Jewish person has been included in the in the production of the process. In the tradition of Beit Yosef, the tradition of Sephardic Jews, the original base text of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, written by the Sephardic master, the Maran. Yosef Gado, Beit Yosef, they do actually have a little bit more stringent laws. And so that is very important. And I say that is because what is important, for me to know is that a lot of people, they think that, and they often say something that I think is just kind of, that is kind of rude and really kind of obnoxious. Because I've heard for a long time people tell me, they're like, oh, you don't know how hard Passover is because you're Sephardic. You can eat whatever you want. And I was like, no. We're not allowed to just eat anything on Passover. We do the same checking of our food. Things must have a kosher for Passover certification. And we actually are sometimes a little bit more stringent about certain things that we keep for Passover and stuff like that. So it is, it is very important, for people to keep in mind. I say that is because I've run into a few schmaltzy people who are Jewish commentators who are out there, when asked about certain foods that they're stocking up for the holidays, like Sabra hummus, filling up the whole refrigerator of Sabra hummus, and people ask, are those kosher for Passover? They're, oh yeah. As a matter of fact, the conservative movement said that they encourage eating kitniyot, and stuff like this. And what happens is that they're basically telling people that, all, Sabra hummus is now kosher for Passover. And no, that's not true. Sabra hummus is not kosher for Passover. It's not now. It's probably not ever going to be. And it's because of the cheap products that they use in it. Specifically the citric acid. They don't use real, lemon juice. They use artificially created citric acid. That could be hummus. So we don't have that. If you have to, as I showed you, there are little tiny containers of hummus that you buy for a lot of money because they're going out of their way to make special batches that are kosher for Passover. And I say that is because when the reality is that there's a lot of people that are saying things that do sound really obnoxious and pejorative. They're explaining why they're just going to eat anything for Passover is, I'm going Sephardic. And you know what, that's what that kind of reminds me of, and especially when this is done by, quote unquote, progressive Jews. It's like when someone asks someone, like, hey, it's Yom Kippur, you're eating on Yom Kippur and you're not going to services, aren't you? Why don't you keep Yom Kippur? Oh, it's because I'm Reform. And no, Reform Judaism has its own traditions. It has its own practice, has its own ethics, it has its own values. And it's important that people be respectful. Be respectful and not denigrate people's, the Sephardic tradition. I think that's, really, really important, that people, show respect when it comes to that, because it is an active tradition. We have an active tradition. It's not just the absence of a prohibition. We have an active tradition of eating kitniyot, and it takes a lot of work, to, make that possible. Which brings us, on to, our next, issue of kitniyot. And again, just like regular products that we buy for, as vegetables and everything else, it is important that we buy our kitniyot fresh if we can. That means, green beans, corn and stuff like that. It is always best to buy fresh. We want to go back to completely organic, like our ancestors have throughout all of this time. We want to go back to organic, to not have any type of additives. And so that's very important. Fresh vegetables are always the best choice. Now, if we are going to purchase, frozen vegetables, that's perfectly fine. You can buy frozen vegetables. As a matter of fact, as a person who's worked in restaurants for a long time, believe it or not, frozen vegetables are really, really good for a lot of products, for a lot of things that we cook, because they're frozen at the peak of ripeness and stuff like that. And so you can find a lot of good stuff in the frozen section, and that's perfectly fine. The only thing about buying frozen vegetables and frozen kitniyot is that, you want to make sure that they don't have any flavorings or additives, no Asian flavors, no butter flavors, none of those types of things. We want to make sure that they're just pure frozen vegetables. And that is completely fine. You don't need a kosher for Passover certification for those even, because they're raw vegetables. So that's really important for us to keep in mind. However, when it comes to dried beans and lentils, which are a staple of the Sephardic diet during Passover, it is important for us to keep in mind that we do need to clean them by hand before Passover. And what that means is that we need to take the time in order to actually go through our beans and separate them. And where did I put my beans at? I put them away already. But basically, what we, in the Sephardic tradition, normally what we're doing tonight, and what I'm going to be doing later tonight, is that you lay out all of your beans, and you'll see it in the other video that I did. You lay out all of your beans, and you have to separate them one from another. Normally, we just quickly go over the beans in order to make sure that there's no rocks, there's no leftover field waste, there's no insects and stuff like that. Like I said, if there's ever junk left in it, it would always make it onto my family member's plate, specifically my grandfather. I can still see his the disappointment on his face now. And so, but it is very important. We don't want to be embarrassed, so it is very important that we clean these items. It's also because sometimes these, beans are, and lentils and stuff like that are grown in fields where they had done grain previously, or they've grown grain side by side. There's rye or wheat that's grown just down, or even side by side, mifa style. For people who have small family farms, many times, people grow a lot of their items side by side. So it is important that we do check our beans. And those of you who come from the Mexican tradition, you know this, laying them out on a sheet or a towel and one by one separating from, and that's how we have to do it. For Passover, just once we have to check all of our beans, taking each bean and separately putting it into our bowl after we've made sure it's not mixed with something else. And that is our checking. It's just as much valid as when people go around with the feather and looking for crumbs and stuff like this. This is the active part of Sephardic Jews of how we check our beans. And it's very important that we do all of this prior to the start of the holiday. We don't want to have any chametz in there when we start the holiday. So it is important for us to check for field waste. That's always part of the case. Now, when it comes to rice, it is more difficult. Rice is required that we check it. However, it is required for those who do keep of the tradition of eating rice. It is generally of the tradition of the Shulchan Aruch that and it has become the minhag over time that you do check your rice, but you literally take rice grain by grain and separate it one from another, putting it into your bowl, and then finally into your bag to make sure that there is no grain included in that. Often it's very easy for rye and oats and stuff like that to make it from other fields into that. And so we're required to check rice. It's a lot harder because of the color and the size as well. So we're required to check it 3 times. And believe it or not, a lot of customs they don't eat rice. Turkish and Moroccans don't do it because it's so hard to check. And this is a debate all day amongst a bunch of Turkish and Greek Jews whether or not they kept rice. Moroccans, whether or not they kept, they ate rice during the Passover holiday, and most didn't. What's interesting is that in Iran, they literally have rice on the seder plate, this is common. But the difference is that I think in the West, what happens is that in the West, you have more problems with cross-contamination. In Asia because of the climate. Wheat products and convex products did not grow in the same regions where you were growing your rice. You didn't have to worry about cross-contamination. In the West, Occidental communities tend to not eat rice because it's just too much work to check it, and people tend to fudge it, so they just don't do it. And so people won't fight over whether or not they checked it well enough. However, there is a bigger problem with rice, and this is what, surprisingly, unless we're a Sephardic Jew, no one's pointing this out because there's just not of the tradition enough to think about it. With rice in the United States, today we have the biggest problem. We're trying to keep rice free from chametz, and that's because within the United States, all rice within the United States is suspect of having chametz as an additive to it, and that's because it is the law in the United States to add enrichment to rice, especially white rice. Because of the way that we over-process our food within this country, what happens is that the rice, they process it so much that that little white piece of starch easily starts to perish. And so in order to add shelf stability, they add extra additives and vitamins into it in order to get it to last longer on the shelf. Only adds a trace element of actual nutrients. But they do, but it is part of the law. It actually, in Section 7 of the U.S. Code, it mentions that, it is the law. In order to produce rice and salad in this country, it must have enrichment. What that means is that all rice that is grown in this country and produced in this country, unless it's made for a special run, and I only know one company that does it, Carolina brand, but all other rice within the country, because of the law that makes it mandatory, it is suspect of having chametz enrichment, a powder that's added into the rice and that coats it. that is something that we do not want, because most often it's taken from grain products. Some of them from wheat, some of them from corn. Corn isn't the problem; it's the wheat, the rye, these types of things, in order to add niacin and all these different types of preservatives that come from certain vitamins and stuff like that. So, what is the best bet? You have to buy just pure, unadulterated, no additives rice, and the best choice is to buy pure basmati rice. That is what we use in the old world, and that's what I recommend here. In the Asian culture, they do not add enrichment to it, and the reason is because you're often steaming it, and if you add that enrichment onto it, it makes it mushy, and they don't like that. And so what happens is that they don't add it to their rice. Buy imported basmati rice. The best this year choices of rice was Mahatma brand basmati. But if you buy regular Mahatma rice, if you buy regular long grain rice, if you buy Uncle Ben's rice, if you buy a Mexicano, if you buy Goya, you're going to find hummus added into that. Your best choices are to go to Middle Eastern or Asian markets and buy unenriched rice. Basmati rice and Thai jasmine rice are my best choices and recommendations this year. There actually is one thing I do want to point out along the way, as we are talking about some of these things. What we want to also notice is that there are before I forget, there actually is, for you to see what a certification for kosher-for-Passover rice looks like. This was one from the previous year, and it has the instructions on it. This was by by Star K Sephardic. It was kosher-for-Passover, and this was a few years ago, and it gives you the instruction. It's customary to check it 3 times. But Caroline and Mehadrin, they specifically had a special run in which they did not have any type of additives created for it. To find out more information about Star K, there is their information, there at the bottom. And so that is one. That is one thing I do want to point out. It's very rare that you're going to actually find kosher-for-Passover certified certified rice, and so it is very important that you do know that there are some other options available. What is important though about this issue of kitniyot is that you do not buy from open bins. You do not buy rice or beans from open bins. And those of you who go to Mexican markets know exactly what I'm talking about. Why don't you buy from the open bins in which people are scooping out and for themselves? And I don't, actually right now I don't actually think that you can do it at the stores because of the coronavirus. They've covered up a lot of those self-serve sections and everything. But even regularly, you do not want to pick up rice and beans from those big open bins. And the reason is because they just pour whatever they've recently sourced into it. You don't know what the source is of those rice and beans, especially the rice. You don't know if there's any additives that are added to it. The other thing is that there's a problem with cross-contamination and with other things being mixed in from some of the other bins. And because of that, we are not allowed to, to take from those. The rabbis have told us that now we should only buy from sealed packages. We do not buy from the open bins, and because of cross-contamination. And my family normally doesn't let me buy from those anyhow, and you know why? Because there's always some wild kids that are playing, that have their hands all up in it and are playing like it's a sandbox. You don't ever want to buy that stuff anyhow. So it is important that, when you select your items, that you make sure that you're not buying from open bins. Now, quinoa is really one of the items that has really animated people during the Passover holiday. It's something that people are actually able to really, fortify their diet with, and is really taken off in popularity within the last decade. And the reason, the reason is rather interesting. Quinoa, when people started approaching the rabbis about what the status of quinoa was, the rabbis early on, some of them took of the position early on that quinoa not only was it kosher for Passover, but it's not kitniyot. It's not a legume. It's not rice or beans or one of these things. And so, yeah. And so, yes, Marie, those beans are only good for using to play loteria. Yeah, the ones you take from the bins. But yeah, quinoa is something that started showing up, in bins, along with the, chia seeds and other types of things like this. But what really got people really interested was that the rabbis, when they ruled on quinoa, quinoa was ruled as not being was not being kitniyot either. So it's not chametz and it's not kitniyot. And so that means that even Ashkenazi Jews who don't keep of eating rice, beans, pulses, stuff like this, they're still able to eat it. And so that really animated a lot of people that there was finally a new product, in the Ashkenazi Jewish diet that where there hasn't been a new addition in the diet for generations. And so that really, really animated a lot of people. And one of the interesting things also about quinoa is that right now it's still only grown, in the highlands of South America and Bolivia, places like. And so what happens is that the areas of where it's grown, it's in high elevation, and because of the high elevation, chametz species such as rye and wheat and stuff like that can't grow. They don't have the oxygen count and all of that they need in order to grow part. So the environment actually keeps the product chametz free. As long as there are no additives that are added into the quinoa, there's no flavors that are added, such as broths or anything that are added that are chametz on it, then it's fine. So my recommendation is buy just plain, buy plain quinoa. That's absolutely fine, even if you do not keep the tradition of kitniyot. And so that's very, very important for me to note, because you're going to find that being included more and more in offerings for kosher for Passover meals. And it's being added a lot more because it excites people having something new by which you're able to fortify. So again, buy quinoa. It's perfect for any tradition to use. Just buy it in the raw form without any flavor additives. Or it must be certified kosher for Passover. Now hummus, as we talked about the hummus, though chickpeas are permitted, the product must have a kosher for Passover certification, as we saw in the product I showed you earlier. And the biggest challenge to buying this is that hummus is created with the use of citric acid here in North America. And citric acid in the United States is most often derived from grains. You're creating it artificially. And what I'm saying is that in this country, in order to make products as cheaply as possible, they don't even bother when they need citric acid to be used in something. They don't even bother to use actual fruit juices most of the time. So what they do is they create it artificially by wheat or by corn. And so that is those are the two most common sources from it. So what happens is that though the chickpea spread itself is fine, the problem is that you might actually have, actual seors, soured fermentations of grain that were added into this, and therefore it becomes, chametz. And citric acid is added into a lot of things as a preservative, not just to add a little bit of bitterness, but as a preservative. It's added to a lot of items. And so that creates a whole new problem that normally we never had to worry about, within, the old world. We didn't, we used for hummus just, lemon juice and stuff like that, just naturally. And so people would, if you come from the Middle Eastern tradition, the last thing that you're expecting is that there could be possible chametz in it because someone used a cheap, knockoff for the lemon juice within it. And so that is the problem within, within stuff like that. with that in mind, I should probably bring this up at this point. You know, citric acid is used in a lot of things, especially like sodas and stuff like this. So what do I have right here? I have a kosher for Passover Coca-Cola. And why is this kosher for Passover? Is that it is made, first of all, it's base. It's a little bit different than normally what we have for Passover, in that than what we normally have all year round. For Passover, it's different. They actually make this batch of Coca-Cola that's kosher for Passover out of sugar. It's just made out of sugar, not artificially created sugar, but natural cane sugar is used in order to create this. Not corn syrup, so it's not kitniyot either. And so that's important. You know, we do have available at the kosher markets, kosher for Passover, you know, soda. And so that is really, really important for us to know. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, it wasn't available to us in California because the distributor had not gotten the licensing in it, and so there was none available in California. So kosher restaurants drove all the way to Arizona, bought a whole truck of, their pickup truck, bed full of it, and they brought it back. But if you notice, on the cap here, it has a yellow cap, and you might not be able to zoom in all that great with it, but it has an OUP that's listed on this. So that's important to know, that first it starts with the sugars and everything, so it's not even kitniyot. And added on top of that, they used for the citric acid, they used the kosher for Passover citric acid. The derivative of kosher for Passover citric acid most often is molasses, and so that's what they used in this, and it's perfect for making something like Coke and stuff like that. And so that is one important thing to know within that, is that in this country they're just really cheap about these types of things. And so that is important for me to point out as well. Someone asked about matzo meal, so I'm going to answer that question right now. That's probably, I should answer that question. So matzo meal. And again, let me explain about matzo meal, because someone, where can you find this? To find the kosher for Passover matzo meal, really the best place is probably at the Gelson's Market. That's where I actually picked this up. And I'll show you here. I'll show you the pictures that I took over at the Hyperion store, so you can see what I got there. And they actually have some end caps there, and they have some end caps with everything that you really need for Passover, the matzahs, and kosher for Passover cereal up there, and your matzah ball mix, and all of these stuff. Your kedem grape juice. Look over here on this. They have chocolate covered matzahs and stuff like that. Even some of the stores have the gefilte fish. They didn't have it though at the Hyperion store. I looked. This is a picture my mom took from the Long Beach store. And these are the underloaves, and they have sweet and regular. And I love the sweet. That is the Polish tradition. When they finally became accustomed to sugar, when it was brought from to Eastern Europe, they fell in love with it, started adding it to everything. And so there is sweet and non-sweet gefilte fish, and you'll find it there. And what is important to know though is that you will be able to find this over there. Now, what is important for me to know though is that about the matzo meal. So matzo meal, what it is that it is actual matzahs. You take in your wheat and you ground it down and everything. You have your washed wheat that didn't get wet until the time you're ready to make it into matzahs. It wasn't soaked or processed in any way. You just use straight wheat to make your matzahs within 18 minutes. And then after it's baked, for 18, it's baked, and it's thoroughly baked all the way through. What happens is that we are allowed to, use the matzah for whatever purposes. Before it's baked, if you add water to it, within 18 minutes, it starts the process of breaking down in order to naturally start the sourdough process that'll lead to fermentation. But once you've actually baked it into matzahs and it's thoroughly baked through, it can't become hummus. You've killed everything inside of it that could possibly, lead to it, creating its own leavening and its own yeast, its own rise in of itself. And so what happens is that they take the matzahs and they grind them all the way down in order to make a fine meal out of it, like breadcrumbs. It's not like flour, it's like breadcrumbs. Very, very dense within this. And so you can use this for, making, whatever type of food that you need. This is, you can use matzo meal without having to worry about this becoming, hummus. And so this is actually what they use for matzo ball soup. In order for it not to become hummus and everything, what happens is that they have to use matzo meal because it's sitting in the pot being wet. It would turn hummus if you use flour. So what happens is we use matzo meal. And although it should be noted within this is that, you're going to use this, but it's not going to give you any lift in it. It's going to be flat. Someone asked me how they can get some of this because they wanted to make bagels. You'll never be able to make a bagel out of this. You know what also makes bagels really, really good is that you add malt into it, a fermented rye product that adds that nice taste to it and stuff like that. But this is, we can use it for any type of food in which we need to add a little bit of thickening, into. Frittatas or meatloafs or, dumplings. Although it should be noted that there are some traditions in which they do not eat products in which you are getting matzah wet. It really comes from an old tradition. It really comes to this, that the fight over kabruk is, just to summarize it, why some traditions absolutely will not ever cook matzah meal or use it in soup or something is because in modern times when they started doing machine-made matzahs, what happens is that people had noticed in the first few years of them creating machine-made matzahs that sometimes the machines didn't mix the water and the flour all the way through. So you'd be in the middle of a Passover holiday and you would break a matzah open in your hand, over soup or something, and you would find unbaked flour in it that hadn't, that hadn't been completely gotten wet and baked through. And so what happens is that that it hadn't been tempered completely through in order to stop it from, becoming hummus. And so what happens is that freaked some rabbis out. So they forbid their communities from then on from ever having any type of product in which you're getting matzah wet because it might not have been thoroughly processed. This got later harder when they started making shmura matzah in Ukraine. I think it was the Lubavitcher Rebbe who again he noticed that cracking a matzah open, there was some unbaked flour within it. And so people freaked out over that. And so there's this big old thing about whether or not to eat gabruks. Keep it according to your tradition. These days we have, matzahs are made, to a lot better quality and stuff like that. You shouldn't have to worry about this issue. Gabruks is really a non-issue. But just know that not everyone eats products in which you're making like matzo ball soup and stuff like that. Some people still freak out over those things because of some historical anomaly way back, in the day. And but there are traditions like that. Let me give you another example. In the Chabad tradition, they don't eat garlic during the Passover holiday. Why? Because back in the old days, they used to use garlic in order to keep rats out of grain, out of the granaries. And so how do you know that this one didn't come from a granary? Well, no one uses it a granary anymore. No one uses it for that purposes anymore. You're not going to get from the market, garlic that was used. However, this has become a tradition, and people keep handing it down. You can't argue with them that it doesn't, the situation in which this tradition was born in doesn't apply anymore. They still kind of freak out over these things. But I think us personally, the more knowledge we have, the more that we have the ability to be able to show where there really is a problem and there isn't. People that do overkill on halacha, it's because they don't have a lot of knowledge. They have to be overly, they have to go out of their way to be more strict because they just don't know. They have to play it safe. And those of us who have more knowledge, are able to see where the real problem is and where it isn't, and are able to divide between that. So the idea of how religious you are shouldn't be based on how few people's houses you can eat at. And that's not the symbol of how religious you are. No. And indeed, great rabbis, showed us how, to find ways when other people couldn't find ways. To be able to divide the real halacha of kashrut and what's appropriate and what's just outdated humrah. But that's enough political speeches, when it comes to that. One of the other things, though, if you don't keep the brooks, if you don't eat those type of things, there are other possibilities. Manischewitz also makes potato starch, as well, and potato starch is a great product to use. We actually use it in place of flour for making cakes and cookies and all kinds of things. It is a great substitute for making blintzes during the holidays and stuff like that. People use potato starch. And this is, very common for people to use. You do not have to worry about, never become, chametz. What's interesting is this is a new world product. Potatoes come from South America. However, in the 1700s, there were, in the 19th century. In the 1700s through the early 1900s, there was a lot of famines that went on, and so potatoes started being imported to other communities, and they accepted it because they had nothing else to eat. Especially, so you'll find very interestingly that people were able to find the answer whether or not potatoes were chametz or not, because they had to find the answer one year when there was nothing else available in the market during a famine that left nothing available. What I'm saying is that we need to find answers to these things because it's hard to get food right now. But if you don't keep the brooks, there is these options. You can use potato starch as well. One of the things, though, I do want to point out is that we don't necessarily want to, there are some things that we probably should avoid here in the United States, unless they are on kosher-for-Passover certified products. There are certain things that I don't recommend, because you're using potato starch. Why don't you recommend what you normally cook with? For those of you who cook with me for our Shabbat holiday event, I tend to use a lot of cornstarch. And why not use cornstarch within this? One of the big problems is that a lot of the places that produce cornstarch also grind down other stuff and package other things that are wheat. So it says right here, puede contener trigo. It may have wheat, may have flour within it. And so we just don't use cornstarch because there just isn't a unless there's special batches made that are, mostly, and those special batches are mostly available to manufacturers, not necessarily to us in the open market. And so, what happens is that, we instead most often use potato starch. There is another alternative as well. That's also a great option that you can find as well. Tapioca starch. Tapioca starch is also a really, really great choice to use. That's often used in in Asian food, so you'll probably find it in the Asian sections as well. And so that's another great chametz-free product that you don't have to worry about. It's not kitniyot, it's not kitniyot, and it's not chametz. So people of any tradition can use tapioca and potato starch flour. Now, one of the things that I mentioned, though, is that in your matzo meal, if you're using matzo meal, it's not going to give you any lift and rise. Then how do you get good floating, how do you get floating kiplachen? How do you get matzo balls that are floaters and not sinkers? Everyone wants floaters, not sinkers. Sinkers are depressing. And how do we get floaters? Well, if you look on your matzo ball soup mix, we have our Manischewitz, excuse me, a matzo ball soup mix, and right here, what you'll see within it is that what's the ingredients? Matzo meal, salt, monocalcium phosphate, sodium bicarbonate, onion, black pepper. But I'll go back right there. It says sodium bicarbonate. How do you get floaters and not sinkers? What you do is you add sodium bicarbonate to it. You add you're adding baking powder to it. And so baking powder artificially, with the heat and everything in it, it creates bubbles in it, which gives a lift to it. Instead of like yeast, which breaks down something, which starts a process of breaking down, of corruption that starts to sour and break down the product, which becomes chametz. What this does is this is a scientific workaround in which we're just adding bubbles to something with heat. And so this is absolutely permitted. I've had, believe it or not, old Ashkenazi Jewish women, fighting with me when they found out that this is the way that it's done. Well, that's breaking the rules. I mean, you're not supposed to have, yeast and leavening. I was like, no, it's not even about yeast. Yeast isn't even one of the forbidden, issues, when it comes to that. That's another issue I should bring up right here. While we're talking about, because that's another question that people ask me. Why is it that on some of these kosher-for-Passover products it says nutritional yeast on it? And the prohibition is against chametz. It's not against yeast. And believe it or not, in a lot of products, we actually use nutritional yeast in these products. So that's very important. Let's give you an example. We have right here, this is osem soup and seasoning mix. This is onion soup mix. And so it is kosher for Passover, and it is parve as well. So it doesn't have any meat or dairy in it. We can use it for either one, but it is kosher for Passover. And what are the ingredients on it? Dehydrated onion, salt, tapioca starch, dextrose, potato starch, monosodium glutamate, yeast extract. Yeast extract. That's often what gives flavors into a lot of these things is yeast extract. But no, it's a non-chametz product that is created that adds flavor. And so what happens is that don't freak out if you see nutritional yeast that's added onto products. It's to add nutrition and also to add taste most often within products. So that is very important that, for us to, keep in mind, when it comes to that as well. But it is very important that we do make sure to check our products. Because let me give you an example. These are two soups. This is chicken flavor. This is onion flavor. They're both made by Osem. This one right here is kosher for Passover. This one right here is not. And so that's very important for me to note within this. The containers, they often look exactly the same. You cannot just assume because you're buying something in the kosher section that it is kosher for Passover. And matter of fact, you'll look when you see on this product, it actually says in it that it may contain wheat within it. And so that's actually, brought up right within it. And plus it's also kitniyot and stuff like this, and whereas this one isn't. So this one has a possibility of being chametz, It is kosher, but not kosher for Passover. And it has kitniyot, and this one is kosher for Passover, and it has no kitniyot included in it. But it does have nutritional use. But it is important that we are able to differentiate between some of these items. And let me go over here for a second, guys. I'm going to show you some products as well that we kind of want to watch out about. And we want to check products because we don't, side by side, a lot of products can look, like they would be kosher. And that's very important that when we're checking our kosher products, that we make sure that each of them has a kosher for Passover symbol. But it's also important that in this country, we not assume about a lot of staples that we are probably used to eating in our tradition in other countries, and that we are already accustomed to, but are very problematic if we buy these products in this country. We won't necessarily probably have problems in other countries, but here in the United States, because of our production, there are certain problems that lie in products that we find. Like, let me give you a certain example of certain things I just took out of my cabinet because I can't use them for Passover. And this is why we check everything. Za'atar. Why can't I use the za'atar? Because the za'atar on it has citric acid that is added into this. I wasn't able to get from Sadat information about where they get their citric acid from within this. And of course, it's artificial. It would say lemon juice if it was lemon juice. But this is citric acid. It's artificial. There's these little crystals that are added into this. And so za'atar, normally, normally we don't have to worry about a lot of these things, but this is something that we are not going to be using during the Passover holiday. Also, these ones I have to give up as well. The tahine. I have to give these up for the same reason, just because they have citric acid that is most likely from it, and from artificial methods, and so we're not going to be using that. I'm not going to be able to use them. So what I did is I made my own blends of chili piquin and stuff like that I'm going to be using on fruits and stuff. But there are also certain things that you want to, especially if you're eating out. A lot of people, you're going to notice that a lot of your friends are keeping kosher for Passover throughout the holiday. Even when they're eating salads, they're being very bare bones about it, just using lemon juice and olive oil and very few seasonings, trying to use herbs to add extra flavorings and stuff. And because oftentimes within our country we have a lot of problems. We can't use products that we normally do in other countries because of the way we produce them. Like, let me give you a perfect example. Right here we have vinegar, which we often use for salads, and we also use it as a preservative in a lot of products. But the problem is that in North America, in the West, especially in Europe and North America, it is very common for vinegar. These days, with modern production methods, they don't bother to make it out of fruit juices for the most part anymore. When you're making large industrial, and commercial brands of vinegar. Some vinegars are made out of like wine, stuff like that, like balsamic vinegar, and you shouldn't have too many problems with some of those as long as you get them for kosher for Passover. They don't have any sulfites in them, which are kind of problematic, and most people avoid those all year round if you're a person like me. But the thing is that vinegar, regular table vinegar and stuff like this, what happens is that most often it's made from grain. The Anglo traditions in England, in North America, the United States, and Canada, especially in Canada, it's common for your white vinegar to be made out of wheat. And if it's not made out of wheat, then it's most often made out of corn. And it could be wheat or corn. We just generally don't know what the source is for this. Interestingly, they've added a label in recent years to this Heinz white vinegar, and it says on it, it says on this, our distilled white vinegar is made only from corn and crystal clear water. While all of our corn is grown in America, our test shows no traces of GMO in our finished product. And so what happens is that they're trying to tell us, and it's very interesting the wording there, because in North America you have to worry about cross-contamination with mass-made products and stuff like this. And so what happens is that they're trying to say, yeah, no, we make ours out of corn. And of course, it makes sense in North America. We grow a lot of corn, so it's very abundant. It's native to us. So they make theirs out of corn. But the thing is that this doesn't have a kosher for Passover certification. We don't know in the way that it was processed. If the vats were cleaned ahead of time. These other types of things. We really don't know. What necessarily we're getting until we finally, this brand finally, starts creating a kosher for Passover line. It seems like it would be very easy for them to do special runs, but they really don't have to, Heinz as a company, because there are a lot of kosher for Passover brands out there at the kosher markets that you'll find. You're just not really going to find them at most regular markets. One of the other, common sources that people use if they're not able to find the kosher for Passover vinegar. In the old world, the common tradition of what people used was apple cider vinegar, and this says on it that it's made from all natural apples and stuff like this. And so yeah, but again, because we can find these things generally in areas like Los Angeles with the kosher for Passover certification, we're required, to get those. So these are going to be going away. And lastly, one other product that has to go away is the soy sauce. Because if you look on the soy sauce, what you'll notice is that the third ingredient on this is wheat. And but there are some tamari brands, I believe, that you can find that might not have any wheat included in them and stuff like that. I mean, they just won't have a kosher for Passover certification on it, but I think you will be able to find those available to you. Yeah, so that's one point I wanted to bring out. Check your ethnic foods too, because sometimes they put weird things that you would not expect in them. Now, the other thing that's important for me to bring up right now is that when it comes to when it comes to milk products, when it comes to buying milk, we are allowed to buy milk in the United States. During the holidays, we do. But we do want to try to buy our milk before the holiday. We want to buy our milk before the holiday because there might be some trace additives that are added into it. And what happens is that tomorrow we're going to be saying a prayer in order to that we ask that everything that we have not found, that we've done our best to clean and check, but any comments that might be found, it become ownerless. And and that it become a possession of no one, like the dust of the earth, and that it be nullified. And so what we want to do is we actually want to buy all these products, such as milk, that might have trace elements that are allowed within the proportions for Passover, within the 1 in 60. The thing is that we do want to get them before on the holiday in order for them to be included within this blessing. If you are buying lactate milk, again, you want to buy it before the holiday for these very reasons. Lactate milk is absolutely permitted. I am very, very indigenous, and the rest of me is very Middle Eastern. So I am very lactose intolerant. It's just I don't have a natural, I don't have the natural enzymes for breaking down lactose. Fine, I can buy lactose milk, lactose-free milk. You can buy lactate milk. Just make sure to buy it before the holiday. Now, also, for those of you who are going to buy milk alternatives, you can buy rice milk. You can buy, almond milk and stuff like this. These are absolutely permitted. They are allowed. Again, though, you want to make sure to buy these before the holiday. The thing about any type of milk is you want to make sure, though, that there's no additives. We cannot buy the chocolate flavored. We can't buy vanilla flavored, none of these. If we're buying for the holiday, it has to be without any extra flavors and additives. The vanilla often comes from an alcohol and, an artificial alcohol, and there's chametz and stuff like this. So the thing is that we buy just, regular milk, rice milk, almond milk, and that's perfectly fine. Some soy milks can be complicated, because of their processing, but rice milk, almond milks are completely fine. Make sure to buy them between the holiday. Make sure that they do not have any flavor additives. Do not buy oat milk. Oat milk is literally chametz. You're drinking water chametz. Oat milk is wonderful. I use it, normally because I'm lactose intolerant. But it is gluten-free. It'll be listed as gluten-free, but it is not chametz-free, and that is important for us to know. And I'm going to say it right now. No, chametz-free does not mean, gluten-free does not mean chametz-free. You can have things that have the 5 grains in it that are and that have actual chametz in it, so they're completely 100% chametz, but are free of gluten. Let me give you an example. Cheerios. Cheerios are 100% gluten-free. They're made of oats, but they're 100% chametz. And this is even harder because you have liquid chametz, and what we're talking about, oat milk. We do not use oat milk. So that is one thing that we do have to keep in mind at this time of year. Now, nutritional drinks, we are able to use nutritional drinks. For those of you who have life-threatening illnesses, I'll tell you, through the worst years of dealing with leukemia, the worst years of dealing with HIV/AIDS, when I was really sick, 96 pounds, not able to keep solid food down. I depended on Ensure. I depended on a lot of liquid diets, and you are permitted to buy liquid Ensure. All of these liquid drinks for nutritional purposes. For health reasons, we are allowed to do whatever necessary in order to maintain our life. And right now, as we have this COVID-19 crisis, the coronavirus is taking advantage of people who are in a weakened state. And we need to keep up our immune system and our bodies and our appetite and everything as much as possible. But do you know that this is something that we do have to very, very keep in mind. We are required to live by the Torah, not die by it. And we must live to celebrate another Passover and another Passover after that. And so it is important that we take good care of ourselves this year. And but it is normally permitted for Passover for us to use Ensure drinks. You should try to get them unflavored if possible. If you are not, though, able to get unflavored, and I know that's probably the possibility right now as there's run on the market, you are able to buy the flavored varieties if that's all they really have available. The thing is, just make sure that they don't have oats added to it, that they don't have wheat or oats. They often add oats into it to keep it gluten-free. Make sure that it doesn't have oats, and it will be fine. That is completely kosher for Passover. You don't have to worry anything about that. Again, try to purchase that before the holiday. And you'll find on the Orthodox Union website that they have a whole list about nutritional and dietary supplements. And they'll give you all the brands of Ensure, Boost, and everything, and recommendations about stuff like this. Now, the other thing I want to bring in mind, peanut butter. Peanut butter is really going to help people be able to keep up your nutrition and your protein at this time of year. But there is something very important. peanut butter, if you're buying Skippy or Jif, don't buy it for Passover. You definitely don't want to buy that, because you have to worry about cross-contamination plus additives and all kinds of stuff. Even when you're dealing with a lot of natural, 100% natural peanut butters, at best you're getting about 70%. 70% peanut butter. There's other things that are added to it, but you can go to places such as Sprouts and all kinds of other, maybe a little bit higher end kind of organic stores, and they'll absolutely grind down peanut, almond butter, any type of nuts. They will make butter out of it for you. I know a lot of you don't like that because sometimes it starts to separate. You have to mix it because and it's kind of hard and stuff like that. But what you can do, if it's hard to get your kids to eat stuff like that, what is important is to you can make it creamier by adding some honey into it. By adding honey and a little bit of salt, you can actually mix it into that, and that'll make things better. Another question that came through. Sugars are completely fine as long as they're natural, cane sugar, brown sugar, all of these, as long as they're completely 100% cane sugar and stuff like that. You don't want to get artificial sugars, again, because they can be derived from other weird sources, and that might have chametz in them or the process to create that. So as long as you're buying 100% cane sugar, you're fine. However, powdered sugar must have a kosher-for-Passover certification on it. And that is because they add extra starches into it in order to keep it from, lumping up, in order to keep it from caking and to keep it powdery. Most often, what that is they're using flour. They're using just regular all-purpose flour into it. In the United States now, if you're finding gluten-free, you might be able to find it with the use of cornstarches, but they don't often say within it. So that is problematic. Make sure that if you're buying powdered sugar, that you make sure that you're getting something that is kosher for Passover, or that you're very, very certain of what its sugar derivative or of what its starch derivative is within that. And so that is very important for us to note within that. Lastly, again, I want to bring this up because one of the things you can also do, and I picked up some of these are going to be great. One of the things that if you are trying to get a little bit more food down into the stomachs of your children and your elderly family members, I think this is also a great way. I know a lot of the food is very bland because we don't have a lot of things that we're accustomed to with processed foods. Especially if you're ill, if you're infirm, you sometimes just don't feel like eating. I know I have that problem. I basically take chemo in pill form, and I've been doing it for a long time, and I get sick from it. And so what happens is that oftentimes I don't want to eat. I just, I'll pass up, and it gets harder when things are bland. You know what I mean? Can become difficult to eat. And so I think this is really a good way to help build a little bit of appetite and get some more food down. Egg matzahs are, even though you're not allowed to use them for the Seder, we can use them for the rest of the meals for, the 8 days of Passover, the week in Israel of Passover. We're able to use egg matzahs in order to fortify people's diet. As you'll notice, it says on it, according to the Rama, the Polish rabbi who wrote the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch that was written by the Sephardic master, the Maran, Rabbi Yisraelis, he wrote a ruling in the Shulchan Aruch, and it says here, according to the Rema 462, section 4, these matzot may be used in case of necessity by the sick and elderly. They cannot be used for the matzah's mitzvah at the Passover Seder. So you can't use them at the Passover Seder for the mitzvah of achilat matzah, because that is the mitzvah, to eat matzah. Just, eat the bread of the humble bread of affliction. And so what happens is that we can't use it for the Seder, but we are able to use it otherwise for the rest of the week of Passover. And so that's very important for us to note within this, is that in the Ashkenazi tradition, this is only allowed in for the infirm and the elderly. However, in the Sephardic Jewish tradition, we allow it for anyone. And it's because it was our tradition back in Spain and in North Africa and throughout the Middle East, that you would mix in with matzah that wasn't going to be used for the Seder. You would mix in not just egg, but as you see in the corner, fruit juices. And so you have fruit juices, white wine, all kinds of different things to add flavor. And so that's the point of this. Adding egg and fruit juices only adds trace amounts of extra nutrition, really. I mean, it doesn't add a whole lot of nutrition, but it does make it a whole lot tastier, and people are more likely to eat. So that's the whole thing. Use everything we have in our arsenal in order to try to get your family to eat, because we need to keep up on nutrition at this time of year. And so that's really important for me to stress that there are all these possibilities out there. Now that we've dealt with nutrition, let's get on to the final stretch and talk a little bit more about how we can celebrate through this holiday. And if you've been locked, you've been locked up with me for weeks now. We've been alone together for weeks during this quarantine. And I can tell by my Facebook feed that a lot of you are taking up drinking, l'chaim. And one of the big problems is that now as we're coming into Passover, there's a whole lot of limitations, because we don't have a whole lot that is available for us to drink in terms of alcohol, for the Passover holiday. And so of course we can't drink beer. We can't drink beer and stuff like this because it's made of the grains and stuff like that. It is fermented grains and all of this stuff down there, broken down, and it's liquid bread. That's why it justifies drinking so much of it. And but we can't have it during the Passover season, so we don't have beer. So a lot of things that come from the things that come from the grains, we aren't allowed to have, and so that really eliminates, believe it or not, a lot of the alcohol that we drink, especially now in the modern age. Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the alcohol that we drink actually is produced from grains. And most people don't realize that a lot of the alcohol that we have now is not made from a lot of the products that we think that it's made out of. We often think a lot of things are made out of grape juice or corn or potatoes or stuff like this, and they're often not. Like, for example, we're coming up on Passover, and what a lot of people assume, they're like, oh well, I'm just going to drink we're going to start drinking vodka. And the problem is that for the most part in the West, it's very, very hard to get a kosher for Passover vodka. It's very, very hard to, because even vodka is most often created from grains. You can do it, you can do it from rye. You can do it from, you can also use corn and stuff like that. So, all kinds of different things you can use. But it is important that we make sure that we are not, drinking alcohol that is coming from grain forms. And so let me bring up a few options that I found this year that I think that you are going to that I think are going to be able to add just a little bit of festivity that only the spirits can bring. And so let me share some of these with you. Okay. And so, let's go down here. And so, went by too fast. Okay. And so, One of the things that I should point out is that we do have special Passover runs for just about everything. Like, what is the staple drink in Eretz Israel, in the Middle East, that we have? Arak. And, arak is really the staple, drink that we have, when you're going for the spirits. And, you can actually find really good, really good kosher for Passover products. The best one that I can really recommend really is the Ashkelon Arak, which is made on kosher for Passover. You can see the symbol on it, and you can see the symbol on it right here. It's OKP. So OK, and it has a kosher, it has the P for it, so it means that it's kosher for Passover. OK is an excellent. Is most from families really like OK as one of their hechshers, and so. Yeah, this lovely brand has OK, a Passover certification. What is the base for their alcohol? They're making it out of molasses, and it says right here. It's a special run that is made out of molasses. Another one that you're going to be able to find here in California is actually come from San Francisco. Number 209. Number 209 is kosher for Passover when it has a symbol on it. Now, all of their stuff is kosher for Passover, but they do have kosher for Passover lines. And as you can see, it has an OUP on the vodka right there. That's a California brand. And if you can't find it locally in your stores, you could probably find it online. It is a very popular brand here, and highly recommended on number 209, and it is OUP, so it has a really good hishkachas, really has really high supervision within this. One of the other brands that is that is also important to point out is the Moses Vodka brand. This is also one that you want to keep in mind as well. And again, they're using molasses and sugars in these in order to achieve a lot of this. And so that's important for us to know. Now, this one here, this one is a Russian style, Zahrawi Russian style vodka. No, actually, I think most of vodka is made out of potato, now that I think about it. This one is a potato one, excuse me. This one here is made out of sweet potato. We have a Russian style vodka that is made out of sweet potato. And so this is a unique one. I actually want to try this one out. I just didn't have a chance to buy it before, but it does have an OUP on it. It is certified kosher for Passover. Que viva Mexico, that they do provide options for us south of the border. My peoples are looking out for you in order to make sure that we have something to say l'chaim to that's coming from Mexico, that's kosher for Passover for the season. And tequila, of course, tequila, it should, people should process it right, so they could always be kosher for Passover, because tequila is a natural product that we, distill and process, and there's plenty of it, and it's grown from a plant, and it's not chametz, and it's not, it can never become chametz, and it's not. It's not kitniyot either, and so tequila is one of these things that's can really brighten up a Passover holiday. It's not kitniyot, it's not chametz. As long as you make sure to buy something that is produced without coming into contact with other chametz. And so far, I've only been able to find one brand. I've asked around, I've done all the research, and there's only really one brand that I know that is kosher for Passover, and it is certified as kosher for Passover. And it's the Cava Blanco tequila, and it is it's a white tequila, and it is, now what's important to note about this is that it does have a kosher for Passover symbol on it. And the reason why it is kosher for Passover is because it is a white tequila. I was asking one of my friends earlier, what color tequila is, and she was like, gold, and no, because we there are certain brands that are promoted as being special because they're gold, but believe it or not, certain tones and colors that we have in tequilas, believe it or not, are not necessarily from the agave that they have, they've harvested from, but because of how they are aging and finishing their tequila. Many times what they do is that they use old wine casks, and that is very common to use old wine casks for making tequila. They're recycling old wine casks in order to make tequila. And that creates two problems. First off, because Jews have to have kosher wine. That's really one of the big standards, especially during Passover. Stuff like this, it's very important that we know the sources of our wines and stuff like this. But normally we only allow wine that comes specifically made for Jewish people, because in the old days wine used to be made mostly by monasteries, and you didn't want to buy a wine that was dedicated to Bacchus, the temple of Bacchus, or to the Virgin of this and that and the other. So it is required that if you're using wine as Jewish people, that we use sacramental quality wine. And so what happens is that there is that issue of wine, and the other issue is that wine often comes with sulfates when it's made all year round, and so you might have some chametz in that processing. So there's two issues within there: cross-contamination with wines that aren't kosher, and possible chametz added in because of the use of these casks and stuff like that. So we should only go with pure pure wine. Pure white tequila that was not aged or finished in wine casks. That is very important for us to note within that. And so we do have tequila. Let me know if you guys are able to find it. I might go to the Ramirez and try to find some of this. I'm trying to think if there's any other questions. And so I guess I've gone through all of our question and answers for now. There's just one more I want to leave with. Just popped into my head. How about our marijuana? How do we know that our marijuana is kosher for Passover? And we need to make sure that our marijuana does not have any additives or flavors that are added onto it. Now, of course, you know that Pineapple Express and blueberry, nugs don't actually have any flavor to them and stuff like that. But it does become problematic if we are starting to buy condensates that are mixed in with flavors. That's probably not a good idea. We should avoid that, just like we avoid flavored tobaccos, during the Passover holiday. The only thing is that there is still a debate on whether or not marijuana is kitniyot or not. And I don't know. I don't debate this because I'm a Sephardic Jew. Doesn't matter to me. I'm still going to have medical marijuana no matter what. And so that's very important for me to know that is one of the questions that people always bring up: is marijuana permitted during the holiday? Yes. Just know that it's probably, depending on what rabbi you're asking, it might be listed as kitniyot. However, I think that, I've answered all the questions that I can. If you need any help throughout the holidays, reach out to me. One of the best advice, that they could, really just give us all throughout this is, just try to buy food that has the least amount of additives, preservatives, and fillers in it. Just once a year do we have this time in which we are asked to be scrupulous about what we eat, that we inspect all of these items for chametz, just like in this spiritual time of year. At the same time, the understanding that this chametz represents pride, represents vanity, represents the pride and stubbornness of Pharaoh. And instead, what we are trying to connect with is the humble experience of the Israelites, of the Hebrew slaves who we are with them in our generation also moving on a path towards freedom, towards liberation. In every generation, we are called out of Egypt, and we are making, our path. But it is important that at this time of year that we connect to our previous generations by passing down the know-how that we know in how we process our foods for the holidays and the dishes that we cook. We're passing down our know-how, our recipes, and our joys. And so at this time, I want us to be able to take joy in this holiday. Hopefully, I've been able to demystify a lot of these very, very complicated things for you to be able to find a way amidst this COVID-19 crisis to be able to shop as quickly as possible, as economically as possible, and have a kosher, a happy, a tasty, and a festive holiday. And that's what we wish each other on this holiday. And that is how we greet each other, is that we should have a Pesach that is, that is kasher and basimcha, that it should be kosher and happy. And the more knowledge that we have, the easier that we can make it for ourselves and on our families. So if you need any help, reach out to me. I'm always here. I hope that those of you who do not have anywhere to be for the Passover Seder tomorrow, that you join us here at the Boyle Heights History Studios, a museum and cultural center, for a Passover Seder being hosted by the Boyle Heights Chavurah, the grassroots Jewish community of East Los Angeles. And I will be leading the service. Me, Rev Shmuel Gonzalez, the Mario Wojcik, I'm going to be here with you. I'm trying to share some joy with you. So you're not alone in this holiday season. We're still connected. We're still attached at the soul. So if you need a place to spend the holiday by, join us here. We're going to be streaming it both on Zoom and also on Facebook. So have a kosher and a happy Pesach, everyone. And sei gesund, be well, be in good health.